The first morning at Crestwood High carried a strange, restless energy, the kind that trembles softly in the air before something unforgettable happens, and as the students filled the courtyard with laughter, gossip, and the usual chaos of a new school day, nobody noticed the quiet figure stepping through the gates, a slim girl, around 16, walking with a white cane that tapped gently on the ground, her dark hair tied neatly, her movements precise, calm, almost unnervingly controlled for. Someone who couldn't see, and only a few curious glances followed her as she made her way toward the office to check in. But behind those unbothered steps hid a past heavy enough to silence armies, a discipline carved through years of relentless training, and a strength she never intended to use unless absolutely forced. Her name was Era, and though she was blind, she perceived the world through sound, energy, breath, and instinct sharper than most sighted fighters could ever dream of. But Crestwood High had no idea. Especially Blake, the school's most notorious bully, a boy who carried ego like armor, cruelty like a hobby, and a smirk that made teachers sigh because they knew they couldn't stop him. Blake and his crew noticed Era only when she accidentally brushed against their table in the cafeteria later that morning, her cane bumping into the leg of Blake's chair, making him spill a little soda. The entire group fell silent. Blake's jaw tightened, his pride pricked by something that should not have mattered at all, yet to him, any perceived disrespect was a challenge, and he stood up slowly, cracking his knuckles as he circled the girl who couldn't even see him. "Watch where you're going," he snarled, expecting fear, expecting an apology, expecting her to shrink like so many others. But Era simply tilted her head slightly, listening to every footstep, every breath, every heartbeat around her, and said softly, "My mistake. I meant no harm." Her calmness enraged Blake even more. How dare a blind girl not tremble at his voice? His friends laughed, one whispering something crude, another suggesting Blake teach her a lesson, and before anyone could intervene, Blake kicked her cane out of her hand with a loud crack as it skidded across the floor. Gasps echoed. A few phones came out. Someone murmured, "Bro, she's blind, chill." But Blake never chilled. He shoved Era's shoulder, expecting her to stumble helplessly. Instead, she shifted her weight with surprising balance, barely moving. That subtle motion made Blake pause for half a second, not out of fear but confusion, yet his ego refused to back down. "What's wrong?" "Can't fight back," he taunted. Era could hear his smirk. She could hear his arrogance dripping like poison from his voice. But she simply breathed, controlled and steady, because she'd promised herself never to use her training unless absolutely necessary. She'd been trained by a retired special ops martial arts master who had taken her in after she lost her sight in a tragic accident when she was 9. He taught her to survive, to adapt, to sense the world like a predator in the dark, but more than anything, he taught her the discipline to walk away unless the danger left her no choice. And right now, she still felt she had a choice. But then Blake made the mistake that crossed the line. He kicked her shin. Hard. The cafeteria gasped again as Era winced, not from fear, but from the realization that he wasn't going to stop. Blake raised his leg again, aiming higher this time, laughing as his friends egged him on. "Come on, this is too easy," he shouted, but his foot never landed. Era moved. Fast. Faster than Blake or anyone in the room could process. Her hand shot up, catching his ankle mid-kick with flawless precision, as if she could see every inch of him. Blake froze, eyes wide. "What the?" he choked out, but before he could finish, Era twisted her wrist gently, not enough to injure, but enough to knock him completely off balance. He collapsed backward with a loud crash, trays tipping, food flying, and the cafeteria exploding into shocked gasps. Blake scrambled up, furious and embarrassed. "You little," he roared, charging at her blindly. Ironically, he was the one who couldn't see now, not her. She stepped aside effortlessly, using only sound, angle, and instinct, and Blake slammed into a table. His friends hesitated, unsure whether to jump in or run away, because the girl they assumed was helpless was now standing like a calm storm, silent, unreadable, dangerous only if forced. Era lifted her cane from the floor, flicking off the dust. "Please stop," she said quietly, her voice steady but edged with warning. "I don't want to hurt you." But Blake wasn't a listener. He rushed again, fists swinging wildly. And that was when Era released the restraint she tried so hard to keep. She pivoted, ducked, and delivered a precise palm strike to his chest, not enough to break anything, but enough to knock the wind out of him completely. Blake stumbled back, gasping, collapsing into a chair as everyone watched in stunned silence. The cafeteria was so quiet you could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Era stood perfectly still, listening, her breathing calm again. She didn't pose like a victorious fighter. She didn't smirk. She simply existed, calm in the middle of chaos. A teacher finally burst into the room demanding to know what happened, but no one spoke. Even Blake's own friends shook their heads, unwilling to admit they pushed the wrong girl. Blake stared at Era with disbelief, humiliation carving itself onto his face. But more than humiliation, fear. Era turned toward the sound of his breathing and said softly, "I know you're better than this. Don't become the kind of person who hurts others to feel strong." That single sentence cut deeper than any hit. And then she walked away, her cane tapping rhythmically as the entire cafeteria parted for her like water. Word of the incident spread across the school in minutes. Everyone wanted to know how a blind girl took down the toughest bully without breaking a sweat. Rumors grew, respect followed, and even the teachers began watching her with quiet admiration. But Era didn't care about fame, attention, or fear. She wanted peace, normalcy, a life where she didn't have to fight. Yet sometimes, fate doesn't care what we want. And Blake? He wasn't done. His pride had been shattered publicly, and that kind of wound doesn't heal easily. Revenge began brewing in his mind. Plans formed. But little did he know the truth, he hadn't just picked on the wrong girl. He had awakened a warrior who had spent years learning to survive without sight, who had endured more pain than he could imagine, and who could fight circles around men twice his size. And as tensions built quietly toward a stormy future confrontation, Era walked through the halls with peaceful confidence, unaware of how many lives she had already begun to change simply by standing up for herself. And as the narrator of this story, I'll tell you this: if you're enjoying Era's journey, the courage, the twists, the strength hidden inside silence, then make sure you subscribe to the channel, because more powerful stories like this are coming, filled with emotion, justice, mystery, and the kind of characters who make you rethink everything you know. Subscribe, like, and stay with us, because Era's path is only beginning and you don't want to miss what comes next.